Well, fellas, I got to tell you, it always breaks my heart a little bit whenever we don't do the nerd stuff. You guys know how near and dear that is to me, and we are not going to be doing that this evening. But I take solace in the fact that this time next week, I will be able to shoot the both of you a text and say, gentlemen, we have college football on this weekend.
Oh,
Chills.
man.
I can't tell you how much I've been looking forward to this episode. I mean, like literally for weeks I've been looking forward to this. So what do you say we get into this?
Let's do it.
Let's go.
Onboard computer synchronization.
Now entering the nexus of geekery and guy world. In 3, 2, 1, mark.
Hello, IT? Have you tried turning it off and on again?
This is the Dudes in Hyperspace podcast, a service of Shark Flight Publishing.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to episode 6 of the Dudes in Hyperspace podcast. I am your host, Ian J. Malone, as always, joined by my good friends Dave Daniels and Scott Esther. Get to those guys in just a second, but before I do, let's run down the usual laundry list of ways you can get in touch with us. If you want to know more about the show, you can do so online at dudesinhyperspace.com. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter, at the Hyperdudes for either one. You can also shoot us emails if you've got questions. Old-fashioned, man. It's the way we like it. dudesinhyperspace@gmail.com. As mentioned at the outset of the show, we are not going to do the geek thing for this show. For those who are tuning in for the first time, that is what we are. Seems like for the longest time, there were shows about geek culture and geek stuff, Marvel, DC, Star Wars, Star Trek, all that. They were their own camp, their own tribe. And then there were those of us who love the guy stuff. We like sports, we like beer, we like cars, we like, all of that good stuff. Somewhere along the line, those tribes kind of started to mingle, and we figured it was high time that somebody put a show toward that audience, and so here we are, the Dudes in Hyperspace. So thanks for tuning in. As mentioned, I got two buddies that tag along with me on this. Their names are Dave Daniels and Scott Esther. If you're curious about who we are, believe it or not, we are actually kind of professionals at this. Whether it's our expertise in broadcasting, expertise in professional sport, we actually do kind of have a history in this, the three of us. So you can find our bios online. Again, that's at dudesinhyperspace at dudesinhyperspace.com. Go there, check it out, shoot us an email if you got questions. So fellas, welcome back. What's been going on?
Ooh, man, I'm just excited about this college football thing coming up and about our guest today. So excited.
I am too. Scott, how are things down in St. Pete, man?
It's wet at the moment, but college football is right around the corner, so I do not care what the weather is like at the moment. Let's just get this college football season started.
I'm so with it, man. I'm so with it. Next weekend, we're almost there. It's all right. Well, we've been teasing this thing for a while. We've been telling folks we're doing a full-blown college football preview. The time has come. We've also been teasing the last couple of days in particular that we are going to bring on a special guest to help us do that. People have been blowing up the email box wanting to know who that is. I've been teasing it. You've been teasing it. So I think the time has finally come to get the show on the road. Let's do this. What do you say we bring in our guy?
Let's go.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program. New York Times bestselling author and ESPN senior writer, Mr. Mark Schlabach. Welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. How's the weather down there in Georgia this evening?
Hotter than hell.
I wish I could say otherwise in North Carolina, but nope, it's steamy as all get out up here, man. So, well, thanks for coming by. It is a real treat to have you. Let's go ahead and jump straight into this, man. Heading into 2019, a lot of huge storylines stemming from the offseason. We've got Jalen Hurts transferring to to Oklahoma. You conceivably looking at a Clemson-Bama showdown V5. We've got Ohio State entering the era post-Urban Meyer. Just lots of cool stuff to watch, lots of stuff that's been publicized. But in your mind, as a guy who covers this stuff day in and day out for ESPN, what are the top 2 or 3 storylines that really have you intrigued, have your antennae up heading into the season?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, can anybody crack the ceiling and contend with these teams at the top? It just seems to be such a top-heavy sport right now with Alabama and Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma. Georgia's emerged the last couple of years under Kirby Smart. Is there anybody else out there, whether it's LSU, Michigan, Oregon, somebody other than those 5 that can, become a national title contender and a legitimate contender for one of those 4 spots in the college football playoff, just to make things more interesting. It just seems like it's been so predictable the last few years. And, Alabama, Clemson, Part 5, it seems like we're headed that way again. We'll see if Georgia can get over the hump against Alabama in the SEC. But, to be honest with you guys, I love college football as much as anybody, but it's been a little bit stale and it's been a little bit predictable the last few years.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that about Georgia and the SEC, because that's very much where I was heading. A lot of the listeners that we have for this show are very much in the Southeast. I'm in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina. Dave is down in Tallahassee. Scott is down in Tampa, St. Pete. We've all got connections throughout, whether it's with Duke and Carolina up here, Florida State and Tally, or even stemming all the way down to South Florida and Miami. Yeah, the SEC is very much the powerhouse, and to nobody's surprise, that's the conference that preceded a lot of the schools that you just named. Sticking with Georgia, though, it's a big year for Kirby Smart and the crew. You got Jake Fromm back for his junior year. Most of the offense is back. Defense has lost a few people, but still looks to be really good. On the flip side of that equation, you got Bama over in the West. They returned Tua for his junior year, also with a slew of experience, but, they're not without their attrition. They sent 10 guys to the National Football League, 3 in the first round. They lost 7 coaches, although they bring back Sarkisian. And now you're looking at 2 key injuries to guys like Trey Sanders and Josh McMillan. So, Bama is always going to reload, but that is, that's just what Bama does. But it seems like if there was ever a year that Georgia was primed to maybe step up and take that step to the top of the mountain, this could be it. What do you think of their chances?
I think Alabama's a little bit vulnerable, as much as Alabama's vulnerable. There was the turnover on the coaching staff. I was over there in April and spent some time with Nick Saban, and he's frustrated. He feels like his program has become sort of the Nick Saban school of coaching, and guys have been rotating in for a year or two and then moving on for bigger positions, whether it's as a coordinator or as a head coach, like Mike Loxley at Maryland. This last time he actually thought about going out and hiring nothing but Alabama guys because he knew they would be loyal and would be happy and content and wouldn't be looking to go anywhere else. But, he does a good job of turning over his staff. I think with the injury at linebacker in particular, that is a position where they don't have an awful lot of experience. McMillan hadn't even started a game in his career as a fifth-year senior. They were going to plug him in to replace Mack Wilson. The guys behind him haven't played that much at all. They're really good at outside linebacker, okay up front. I think it's either this year or next. I think next year, after Tua turns pro as expected, and you lose guys like Matt Womack and Alex Leatherwood up front, you got the 3 receivers, Judy Ruggs, Devontae Smith, are probably all going pro. I think they're going to be really decimated by the NFL draft this year. So maybe it's next year. And then the big question is whether or not does Jake Fromm come back?
Right. Well, you being a Georgia guy and obviously being down in that vicinity, you're probably more qualified than most to be able to answer this question. What does the seat look like for Kirby? I get it that he's a Saban guy. They like him. He recruits like a banshee, and that's awesome. But, Mark Richt did some great things at Georgia for a long time and could never get to the top of the mountain, and things started to go sour. Does there come a point when maybe Georgia does start to get a little restless with Kirby?
I don't think they're there yet.
Right.
I think the fact that he got him to the national championship game in year 2 and, was 1 or 2 plays away from getting it done in the SEC championship game and getting back to the playoff a year ago. They've taken that next step. Right. Mark Richt was always good for 10 wins, but they would lose to South Carolina. They would lose to Florida. Something would happen to derail everything. And I think they feel like they've gotten past that with Kirby, with the way he's recruited. Obviously, Georgia fans probably wish he'd closed better against Alabama the last 2 years. But other than Clemson, nobody's closed against Alabama for the most part. And it doesn't look like Nick Saban's going anywhere anytime soon.
Sure.
But getting past the Crimson Tide and getting over that hump is the next step. And with the way they've recruited and the amount of money Georgia's invested in his program, from upgrades at Sanford Stadium to a new indoor practice facility, and the amount of money they're spending on the coaching staff, I think the expectations are a lot higher than they've probably ever been.
Cool. Well, kind of stepping back and zooming back a bit in the SEC, still lots of other really good storylines to keep an eye on. LSU's making a big jump this year, completely overhauling their offense to go to the spread. You've got Burrow at QB there. Most expect he could be fairly prolific in this offense. You've got year 2 with Jimbo. Seems to have a quarterback there that he likes at A&M with Kellen Mond. Then, of course, you've got year 2 of Dan Mullen down at Florida. Me personally, I think there were some smoke and mirrors behind that 10 wins last year, but they're still a great team. Hey, that's not sour grapes. I'm just honest.
Spoken like a true Florida State man.
Yeah, well, we take what we can get, particularly when they thump us at home. But anyway, no, I mean, I do think Florida is a good team, definitely a team to keep an eye on. Frank seems to be getting Mullen's offense. We'll see if he can do it for a whole year. But anyway, lots of stories outside of Bama and Georgia in the SEC that could make things interesting. Do any of these teams have the chance to step up and maybe challenge, barring an injury?
Yeah, I mean, I think Florida's the team that everybody thinks could step up and challenge Georgia. I'm kind of on the same page with you. I want to see it before I believe it. I was at the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl the end of last year. I didn't think Michigan was too motivated to be there. Imagine that, somebody other than an SEC team claiming they didn't want to be there. But I think Frank's got better. He played well by the end of the season, but they lose 4 out of 5 offensive linemen. Just had a backup retire yesterday on Sunday because of epilepsy. P. Ryan's back. Receivers are back. Defensively lost a ton. They've had to dismiss John Huggins and Brian Edwards, one of their signees. So I worry about the losses on defense. And, Dan Mullen's talking a big game. He's talking like he's won something down there. And, that rivalry between him and Kirby Smart is going to get pretty heated, and it's going to get really interesting. And it's probably going to be the shortest handshake we see between any coaches this entire season. So it'll be a fun atmosphere in Jacksonville.
Yeah, Mark, talking about Florida, they open against Miami over in the ACC. And, of course, everyone knows the big dog up there is going to be Clemson. I don't know that anybody's really going to get the opportunity this year to really challenge them for that. But there's a lot of big storylines over in the ACC. Do you see anybody being able to challenge Clemson in the next couple of years?
I mean, it would have to be Miami. It would have to be Florida State. And, I just in the next couple of years, I just don't see it with what Clemson's been able to do in terms of not only on-field production, but just the recruiting. Trevor Lawrence is going to be there for this year and at least one more. I said a year ago before the season, I thought the kid would win 2 Heismans, and I really believe that. I think he's a generational talent. I think he's the best high school quarterback. He was the best high school quarterback I've ever seen. I mean, the kid's phenomenal. And to lose all those defensive linemen and to plug guys in like Javier Thomas and the other guys, they've gotten to the point where they reload like Alabama does. Miami, I'm pulling for Manny Diaz. He's a former ESPN guy. He put me in my place one time, which is one of my favorite stories. Florida State, Willie Taggart inherited a difficult situation. It's well documented that I had questions about the locker room in Tallahassee when Jimbo Fisher was there and caught a lot of flack for it. And I think some of that came to light once he was gone. But, Willie has struggled last year. I think they should have been better than what they were. But I do think he had to not only transform, the roster, but he just had to change the culture. And I think it's been difficult. And I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, but you definitely need to see some improvement this season.
What kind of difference do you think Mac Brown's going to make being back at Carolina right now?
I hope he does well. I love Mac. A little bit of an interesting hire, to say the least, going from Larry Fedora to Mac, who is going to run a pro-style system and slow things down. Not an easy job by any stretch of the imagination. Just if you can get back to 8-9 wins and make North Carolina relevant again, I think that's what they brought him there for, to get it back into good shape and hand it off to somebody else. But I think it's going to be a really difficult task.
Mark, I do want to kick it back to Florida State for just a second. How much of a difference maker is Kendall Briles, particularly given that he's bringing Randy Clements with him, a guy who knows how to coach an offensive line in that system, particularly given that Florida State's biggest problem last year was hands down the offensive line?
Hey, Florida State's biggest problem the last 5 years was the offensive line. And I loved Rick Trickett. He was a great personality. His reputation was fantastic as an offensive line coach, but it just seemed like every year under Jimbo, for whatever reason, they just really struggled up front, other than the 2 years that Jameis was there. But Kendall's a guy that knows his dad's system well. The Baylor situation has been told repeatedly, and there was no documentation that he was involved in that. So getting him and Randy Clements in there to coach the offensive line. I think obviously a little bit of a PR hit bringing him in, but the kid, he's a guy who knows how to coach offense, and they'll speed things up, and we'll see if James Blackman can handle it. And I think Cam Akers is one of the guys in college football that could really bounce back this year and have a big year. He was fantastic as a freshman and struggled with some injuries last year and behind that porous offensive line. And, I think he's a guy that could really bounce back this year.
How much is riding on that Boise State game in Jacksonville?
I mean, it's huge. I mean, Boise's capable of knocking somebody off. They lost Brett Ripien, their quarterback, but it's a program that's knocked off teams like Georgia before. You want things going right. You lose week one in Florida to a non-Power 5 team, albeit one that's beat some big opponents before, and it's going to turn south quick. And I think there are some people who have probably made up their minds about Willie Taggart, fair or unfair, and it wouldn't be pretty early.
Yep. No, I wholly agree. All right. Well, kind of stepping out away from, Southland, we could spend an entire show just talking SEC and ACC football. As noted at the top of all this, there's lots of big stuff happening, particularly in the Big Ten. Urban is now out. Enter the era of day at Ohio State. This is also, in a lot of people's minds, kind of a make or break year for Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. I've got one of my best friends up here in Durham as a Michigan alum, very much an old schooler. He's in his 50s. And he said to me the other day, if Harbaugh can't do it this year, we're done here. He just can't do it. With the team he's got coming back and with the conference around him, this has got to be his year. What's your take on those two programs and where they're at heading into 2019?
With Michigan, I pretty much agree with your buddy. I mean, he has to beat somebody that matters. It looked like they turned the corner last year and they get absolutely walloped at the end of the year against Ohio State in the bowl game, and just really finished ugly. And you look at the end of the schedule, I think they host Notre Dame late, host Michigan State, host Ohio State. So that, 3 tough opponents, but they get them all at home. He brought in Josh Gaddis from Alabama to take over the play calling on offense. They say they're going to open it up a little bit more. Harbaugh's a guy that really seems to be set on the pro style system and controlling the clock and running the ball. And, we'll see if he changes it up much, but Shea Patterson, their quarterback, a high profile guy, had some pretty good moments last year, did not play well against Florida in the Peach Bowl and needs to bounce back, but we'll see. I think it's now or never for Harbaugh at Michigan. Ohio State, I think everything's pretty much setting on Justin Fields' shoulders, and he's a kid that was, I think ESPN had him ranked the number 1 player in the country coming out of high school. The thing people don't realize about Justin Fields, didn't play a lot in high school. Didn't start till his junior year, was hurt as a senior, doesn't have nearly as many starts as guys like Trevor Lawrence and Jake Fromm and some other guys have had. So, we'll see. He looked overwhelmed when he was put into the game at Georgia, put into the games at Georgia last year. And, maybe it was, not the best situation in the world for him, but I think there's going to be some growing pains, and I think he's going to have to grow up in a hurry.
Right. What are your thoughts on Penn State? I know Franklin has built a pretty sturdy club there. They're obviously going to be breaking in a new quarterback, but defensively they seem like they're going to be in a pretty good position this year. Any chance maybe they could step up and make some noise in that conference?
I think they could be a surprise. I think they're Wisconsin with Jonathan Taylor coming back. Wisconsin's got some issues at quarterback as well, but, Sean Clifford taking over, Tommy Stevens transferred to Mississippi State. I think Ricky Slade at tailback is going to be a good player for them. Love some of their guys on defense. Micah Parsons, a sophomore linebacker, I think could end up being one of the better linebackers in the country when it's all said and done. But Penn State is a team that I think is a little bit of a sleeper in the Big Ten, kind of flying under the radar a little bit. If Ohio State or Michigan slips, they could definitely be there. I think Nebraska is another team. Love Martinez, their quarterback. Scott Frost, year 2. Did a fantastic job at UCF. I think it may be a little bit too much too early, but I think Nebraska in the West could be maybe the biggest challenger to Wisconsin.
Right. Yeah, Frost was an interesting guy last year in year one at Nebraska. There's not a whole lot of coaches are going to step out and just say, listen, guys, I know we're garbage right now, but it's going to get worse before it gets better. We're going to get better, but you're going to have to be patient with us because we're not there now. That kind of candor is not terribly – you don't find that a whole lot. But, all right, well, one of the other big stories as noted at the top was Jalen Hurts heading to Oklahoma. I know they have not officially named a quarterback out there yet, but I would – be hard-pressed to see it be anyone other than him on opening day. What are your thoughts on Lincoln Riley and that pairing now having Jalen Hurts? We've seen what he's done with the last two guys, which, oh, by the way, won Heisman trophies. Now he's got a guy that SEC folks know very well in Hurts. Do you think that's going to be a good marriage?
No, I think it's going to be a really good marriage. Did it with two transferred quarterbacks, led them to Heisman trophies. I think he does as good of a job with quarterbacks as anybody in the country. I think they lost 4 out of 5. Offensive lineman, the center, Creed Humphrey's back, really good player. I think you'll see more designed quarterback runs with Jalen Hurts. Murray ran some and was really effective, but I think that was more out of scrambles. I think they'll try to run it more with Hurts. I thought Jalen, by the end of last year, had improved dramatically as a passer, and I think you saw that in the SEC championship game against Georgia. But, he's not going to be Baker Mayfield back there throwing the ball, but I think he's a better thrower than most people give him credit for. Kennedy Brooks back at tailback. They lost Trey Norwood, who was going to be one of their starting defensive backs, to a knee injury last year. Brought in Alex Grinch, defensive coordinator from Ohio State. There's only one way to go up with Oklahoma's defense, and that is up, because they ranked dead last in passing defense last year and have got to get better. So we'll see. They had a lot of young defensive backs playing the last couple of years. Played golf with Shaden Beamer back in July, and he feels like, some of those growing pains on defense are going to start to pay off for him.
Is Oklahoma your favorite to win that conference, or do you think Tom Herman in Texas could have something to say about that?
I think Oklahoma, until Texas can knock them off, and beat them in the regular season last year. But I still think Texas is a year away. Lost a ton on defense. I love Sam Ehlinger, tough as nails. About single-handedly won that Sugar Bowl against Georgia for them, and really tough kid. But defensively, they got a lot of holes to replace. Got to replace the big receiver. A couple of guys up front on offense. So I think Oklahoma's still the team to beat. And beyond that, I don't know. Is it Iowa State, Oklahoma State? Gundy's teams are usually better when not much is expected of them. But, it seems to be a really top-heavy conference.
All right. Well, I got to ask you this as we kind of round down the on-the-field talk, because there is a subject that's been very much in the news, especially in this last year or two, that I kind of want to get to. Everybody does it this time of year, even though it's completely a moot point and it never matters in the grand scheme of things, but predictions, in particular playoff predictions. Here, 2 weeks out from even the first game of the regular season in 2019, if you had to pick 4 teams that are going to comprise your college football playoff for this season, who would they be?
I'm going to go out on a limb. Alabama, Clemson, Georgia.
What a stretch. Who was the last one?
Oklahoma.
Okay. All right. Well.
Yeah, I like Hurts better than Fields at this point. I just, maybe it's Michigan. Again, can they turn the corner under Harbaugh? LSU, I don't trust Orgeron, to be honest with you. Offensively, every time we hear about LSU opening things up, it's much of the same.
Yeah, see the Matt Canada era.
Yeah. It's, ACC, I just don't see anybody challenging Clemson. I think Georgia at 10-2 or LSU at 10-2 could sneak in there as the 4th team.
Yeah. All right, fair enough. Well, the topic I wanted to ask you about, and this is actually a sport-wide issue that we're seeing everywhere, it's the whole topic of fan attendance. Whether it's college football, whether it's Major League Baseball in particular, God almighty, is it visible in NASCAR? It's getting harder and harder to get people to the stadium, to the track, to the ball field. Lots of people are trying to answer this in lots of different ways, whether it's just something as simple as cutting ticket prices. There are major league teams that are going to subscription packages where you can just pay a fee and walk into your ball field whenever you want or whatever game and sit down. In the case of NASCAR, it's cutting huge swaths of their grandstands out so that they can open things up for the existing seats, give people more room to walk around, move around, just more of a leisurely experience. College football is not immune to this. We're hearing it in big-time programs that people are not as eager to run out and drop their money on season tickets as they used to be. What does the fan experience in college football look like for you in 5 to 10 years? We're already hearing about alcohol sales, but, I mean, as a guy who follows this, what do you think this looks like in the next 5 years or so?
I mean, I hope it doesn't go the way of NASCAR, and I don't think it will. But, you've got the safety issues with football, which I think you see, the demise of the Pac-12, which we didn't even talk about. Tells you how relevant that league is right now.
Justin Herbert, that's all you need to know.
Yeah, Justin Herbert, JT Daniel. Fewer players playing high school football in California. I hope it doesn't go the way of NASCAR, but I think efforts are being made. They're improving the wireless technology so the kids can log onto their phones while they're watching a damn football game. The alcohol sales, people are, Dave knows as well as anybody, people are drinking at college football games. The schools might as well make money off of it instead of people sneaking flasks and airplane bottles into the to the stadium. But it's hard. I mean, some weekends I sit at home on a Saturday and watch 8 games. That's a lot more enjoyable than fighting traffic and fighting crowds and sitting in the heat and watching one game. I just think there are so many games on television now. It's so enticing to sit at home and watch as many games as you can on a Saturday from noon until 2:00 in the morning. And I just think that's, I think the diehards will always be there. I think the alumni will always be there. I think the students will be there. But, I think a lot of fans are going to sit at home and watch it on TV or watch it on a laptop.
Yeah. Well, fingers crossed they certainly don't go the way of NASCAR. I don't know how much you follow that sport anymore. I know you used to work for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, write coverage for that sport. But, man, Bristol Motor Speedway used to be the Coliseum. They put 150,000 strong into that track, and that's just for the spring race. You'd have people beating the door down to get in for the night race. There were 38,000 in the stands for last spring's Bristol race. It looked like a graveyard.
Yeah, no. When I was on it, we ran a full page every Sunday and every Friday in the AJC.
When was that?
It was insane. It was it was the year I got married, so it was 1990. It was the year I got married and the year I almost got divorced because of NASCAR. 1999. I did 28 races in 32 weeks.
Holy cow, man!
I don't think my neck has ever recovered. Yeah.
If there was ever a sport that needed to consolidate its schedule, that's it. But that's a whole nother discussion for another time. Well, Mark, before I let you get out of here, man, as I understand it, you've got a new book out. You're, as mentioned at the top, you're a New York Times bestseller. You've written with everybody from Bobby Bowden to Phil Roberts. So what's this new project you got out?
Just had a book come out last month with Shaquem and Shaquille Griffin from UCF called Inseparable. And was able to spend a lot of time with them last year working on it. 2 great guys, and really just took a deep dive into their family history and, their time at UCF. And to sum it up, they love Scott Frost, and they weren't very fond of one George O'Leary. So I think if you read it, I think you'd learn some things that might surprise you about their experience at UCF and know what they're doing at with the Seattle Seahawks now.
All right, good deal. Well, Mark Schlabach, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for coming on. It was an absolute treat. You are welcome to come back anytime, my friend.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right, so thanks again to Mark Schlabach for coming on the show. Always a treat to have a guy with his expertise come on board to talk about anything, whether it's football or beer. We don't care. That was fantastic, so thanks to him. I also want to say a quick thanks while I've got the mic to all of the people who have taken the time out to email me or catch up with me on social media to say that they've really enjoyed From the Ashes. You guys have heard me talk about a little bit off and on, particularly if you follow me on Twitter, about an anthology project that I've had going on. And I had to stay kind of secretive about it because the contracts weren't signed. But it just came out on August 2nd. It's an anthology set in Christopher Wood's Fallen World universe. The anthology is called From the Ashes. And my short story, my contribution is called The Coward of Leon County. And it was a blast. The publishers let me essentially go into their world, which is very dystopian, very kind of Walking Dead, sans the zombies, if you will. And right, my hometown and my home area of Tallahassee, Florida, and Panama City Beach, that whole stretch of the Florida Gulf Coast, and it was a blast. And I got to pay homage to Kenny Rogers, which is never a bad thing. So thanks to everybody who've emailed me and contacted me with thoughts and well wishes for that. Book's doing great, and you can find it on Amazon along with Mark's books. So go check those out. All right, fellas. Well, as expected, we had questions. People emailed us about this episode. They had questions about college football and beyond. So we're going to hit some of the non-college football questions, though, just to appease some of our geek listeners and people who listen to us for other stuff. So what do you say we dig in?
Fire away.
You've got mail.
First question comes to us from Alex. What up, dudes? Given Ian's affinity for Battlestar Galactica and Katie Sackhoff, have any of you had the chance to check out her new series, Another Life, on Netflix? If so, what were your thoughts? Anybody had a chance to check this one out yet? It's sci-fi.
I have not seen it yet, but I did see or did listen to a couple of podcasts that she was on leading up to it and talking about the series. And, it's always impressive to hear, some of these actors and, get a little bit of a peek behind the curtain of what it's like in their lives leading up to it and what they, enjoy working on, the projects and things. So she seemed genuinely excited about it in the interview that I saw, more so than just the normal excitement that you expect an actor to have when they put a project out. But I haven't had a chance to check it out, but it's on the short list mainly due to the interview that I listened to. And then she's also got a series coming out on YouTube, so you can search that up and find that out as well.
Dave, Another Life, you had a chance to check it out?
I have not yet. I am still trying to finish up season 14 of Supernatural. That's taking up a little of my time, so I can get through that. I can be there for the end of that series, but it is definitely on my short list as well.
All right, same here. Natalie and I started to break into the first episode the other night and just decided, it was starting to get late. It's like, we want to start this fresh. We had a lot of stuff going on over the weekend, so we decided to kind of table it, but it's definitely on the list. I do want to see it, very much like Scott. I like Katie Sackhoff, and it's not just because I loved Battlestar Galactica back in the day. She's just a neat lady to listen to speak. When people ask her why it is she does what she does, and she's like, answer that's very simple. It's because of my dad. He was the awesome dad that let me watch Predator when I was like 9 years old. And I have loved action sci-fi movies, the kind of the guy flicks, the action adventure movies ever since. It was what drove her to get into Battlestar. It's what drove her to get into Longmire. Any project that she does, she asks herself, would my dad like this? And if so, I'll take it. So anyway, she still would have been my choice for Captain Marvel. Just putting it out there. Brie Larson had the depth of a petri dish. Katie Sackhoff would not. All right, moving on. Next question. This comes to us from Rachel, lady listener. Thank you very much. Hey, dudes, I know you said this episode was going to be CFB-centric, but I've got to hear your thoughts on the MLB trade deadline. Were there any big winners and losers in your opinion, and will any of these moves impact the trajectory of the forthcoming postseason? Scott, I'm going to let you take that one, man. You're the baseball guy.
Well, we are recording this a couple weeks after, so we've got to see the aftermath of some of these big deals, but we've got, in my book, the biggest winner was the Houston Astros. I mean, no doubt about it, to pick up Zach Greinke and add him to a rotation that already has Garrett Cole and already has Justin Verlander. To run those three guys out, to finish out the season, most likely they're going to end up with the best record in the American League. And then to pit them against anybody in a short series once you hit the playoffs, good luck. Couple that with the Astros offense that is firing on all cylinders and hasn't really slowed down. You're gonna have a tough time beating them come October. Talk about on the losing end of things. Quite honestly, I think you're looking at the Yankees and Red Sox as to the losers of the trade deadline. Yankees really needed a starter. The Astros went out and blocked them from getting Greinke, and they didn't add anything. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out through the rest of the season. Boston on the verge of competing for a wild card spot. They're sitting at third in the division right now, about 7.5 games out from the wild card spot. The back end of their bullpen is going to rest on Eovaldi. They've had 19 blown saves this year, and I don't know that the back end of their bullpen is going to be able to sustain them to get them through to the end of the season. On the National League side of stuff, some of the winners, I think you're looking at the Nationals as a winner on trade deadline. Upgraded the bullpen. You can never have too many arms in the bullpen. come for a postseason run. So they've added 3 new arms in Hudson, Elias, and Strickland. So I think that's going to help them out. And the Braves too. The Braves picked up a top bullpen arm in Shane Green from the Tigers, and then also a veteran reliever from the Giants as well. So to me, those are the the big winners on the National League side. Losers, I think you'd probably take a look at the Milwaukee Brewers. While they made some moves at the deadline, it was more of to me, they just rearranged the chairs on the Titanic.
Yeah.
So nothing screams impact players from who they picked up, and if you're going to make a playoff run, you've really got to try to make a difference on the trade deadline. So that's what I got on the MLB side, trade deadline.
My favorite part of the Major League Baseball trade deadline was everyone finding out that Yasiel Puig had been traded, and he immediately seemed like started a fight out in the middle of the field.
He actually did not start a fight. It was Amir Garrett who was not happy with the way things were going. And,
that's true.
And Puig, and I believe, Scott, you can correct me on this if you want, but I believe Puig was already in the know that he had been traded, and he still marched out on the field to defend his boy. So
yeah, I think the timing is up for dispute on when the word got out.
Yeah.
But it definitely had happened. I think the announcement had been made, and then the suspension came down for the fight. So
yeah.
So he actually served his suspension as a member of the Indians, from what I understand.
Right.
And let's not forget, Cincinnati has been a big part of the trade deadline. While they were never a contender, so they were a seller from the beginning. Puig, went to the Indians. He's going to make an impact there for them. I think they're going to be able to charge and catch the Twins. And then they also made a deal for Scooter Gennett. So he went out to the West Coast for the Giants.
Hated to see that. I know there was no place for him on that team, but Scooter was one of my favorite guys on the roster, and I hated to see him go. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not hating at all on what Josh Van Meter is quickly becoming out there. But I understand the business of it, but I like Scooter, and I hated to see him go. And he put out a really nice message to Cincinnati fans on Twitter when he got traded, just to say, thanks for having me. It was a blast. I loved being here. You guys take care and best wishes. So class act there. Interested to see what that rotation is going to look like moving forward, man. I'm just saying, I'm not going to turn this into a Red show, but I will definitely stake a claim to say, Luis Castillo, Sonny Gray, if they hold on to Alex Wood, now you're adding Trevor Bauer, Desclafani's come around, Tyler Malley, some are still not ready to throw in the towel on him just yet. He could still be productive. So Derek Johnson doing some things out there, man. So, all right.
I'm a little excited about my Marlins pick to finish third in the Little League World Series this year. So
somewhere around here, I have a toilet sound effect that I can have out there for you if you want. I can add that in post-prod. All right, last question. This comes to us from Joel. Ian, you suck. Oh, well, thank you for that, Joel. I really appreciate that.
That's a wise man, Joel. Thank you.
Everyone needs some constructive criticism.
Joel says, I get it. You're a redneck Florida boy who cut his teeth on Miller Lite. Fact is, you live in NC now, and we've got a ton of awesome craft beer in this state for you to sample. Give a shot to Red Oak Hummingbird the next time you're out, then call me in the morning. You're welcome. Joel, you're kind of a tool. But I will tell you, as craft beer goes, Red Oak Hummingbird, not too bad. It's not too shabby. I was at the Bulls game last Saturday, actually, and went up to Jackie's Landing there above the first base line. I was like, give me a Miller Lite. They're like, we have no domestics here. Like, well, that's cute. What do you got? So I went with Red Oak just because that's very much here Triangle beer, and I knew the Hummingbird was fairly decent beer. And on a nice, hot, sticky summer night in a ball field, man, it went down smooth. So props to you, and you're really not a tool. You might be, but I'm going to say you're not. Email us again anytime. So, all right, that's going to do it for Dude Mail. As always, folks, if you want to get involved for our next episode, we welcome questions of all kinds. You got geek questions, you got sports questions, you got beer questions, or if you just want to slam on one of us, do it to it. At the Hyperdudes on Twitter, at the Hyperdudes on Facebook, or you can email us at dudesinhyperspace@gmail.com. I think that's going to take us down to the hour, so what do you say we do White Flag?
Kick it.
White flag.
Okay, so for those just tuning into the program for the first time, White Flag is where the dudes and I kind of throw out 2 or 3 things that kind of are on our radar moving forward in the next couple of weeks. Could be geek stuff, could be sports stuff, could be whatever meets our fancy, but that's the joy of White Flag. We fly free that way. So, Scott, I'll start with you, man. What's on your radar coming up?
Oh man, you guys don't want to hear about this, but the Premier League starts back up. We got soccer going on. I am going to beat this drum. You know, it is. It's a lot of fun for me to see it all come around again. The MLS is going to start to wrap up their season. You've got the NWSL here in the States wrapping up on the women's side of things. But the Premier League gets going. Bundesliga in Germany. Check it out. Pick a team. And go with that. So I'm gonna stick to that on the white flag for today.
Dave, how about you, man? What are you looking at in the next couple of weeks?
I too am looking forward to a soccer game, but only because I think I can get some of the kids' soccer onto America's Funniest Home Videos. No, obviously, August 24th, Miami versus Florida. I will be in the house watching that game with family.
Sure.
Getting up with some of my ESPN guys that I've met along the way to get the chance to see if I can get some more of them on the show, and also looking forward to the Zombieland Double Tap when it comes out here in a few months or in a month. I think it's about a month, isn't it?
Yeah, that was not a film I needed a sequel to, but I'll give it a shot. No pun intended. Well, kind of pun intended. Yeah, I mean, it could be fun. All right, for me, well, naturally, Bristol Night Race. Mark and I touched on it just a little while ago. It is one of the crown jewels of NASCAR. The racing there has not been quite as epic as it has been in previous years, but that's a big bar. And those who follow NASCAR racing and know old school Bristol know what I'm talking about. But it's still Bristol, and it's still under the lights on a Saturday night, and I will be watching. Also, like Dave, I will be watching for Florida versus Miami. I don't think we're going to have an opportunity to do another episode before that game, at least not one I can edit in time. So Florida v. Miami, I will be watching that. I think it's going to be a better game than most people realize. I do think Miami brings some horses to the table. I'm not sure what Florida is, as we touched upon earlier. So I'm going to be interested. I picked Florida to win that game, but I think it's going to be a lot closer than folks realize. I think Miami will make it interesting for a stretch. In the non-sports end of things, not a whole lot happening in Geekland right now. We just had San Diego Comic-Con, as was well covered in our last episode, so lots of big news. Now we're kind of at that little bit of a lull zone when you're in between the summer blockbuster season, but you're not quite yet to the fall Christmas movie season. So not a whole lot happening right now. That gives me plenty of time to read. So right now I'm cracking Kevin Steverson's Salvage Title trilogy. Just wrapped Salvage Title. I'm getting ready to roll into Salvage Fleet. I'm reading that because 1, they're fun books. 2, he's a buddy of mine. And 3, I'm also reading them for reasons that I cannot discuss yet on this very program. So stay tuned for that. Tease, tease, tease. All right, fellas, that's going to put the wraps on episode 5. Thank you for coming along with us ride. As always, thank you again to Mark Schlabach. It was an absolute treat to have that guy on. He's welcome back anytime. Thanks to our listeners. If you love the show, whether it's your first time listening or your 6th time listening, tell people about it. Tell them about it on social media. Definitely tell them about it in the reviews. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, Stitcher, whatever. If it allows you to leave 5 stars in a blurb, do it to it. We are most appreciative. One more time, the ways you get in touch with us are on Twitter, @TheHyperDudes, same on Facebook, and dudesinhyperspace.com. So I think that's going to do it. Next time we check in, we should have lots to talk about, whether it's college football or the Major League Baseball playoffs. Lots and lots and lots of good stuff on the horizon. So thanks for coming along, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode. See ya.
See ya. Later.